Today's episode contains conversations surrounding suicidal thoughts, mental illness, alcohol abuse, use of psychiatric medication, incarceration, and discussions surrounding bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. Listener discretion is advised. This episode is brought to you by Robert Stevens Jewelers. Thank you to our sponsors for your support on our first season of the Alter Ego podcast. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/alter-ego. That's betterhelp.com/alter-ego. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Today's guest is Bill Barbary. Bill is coming to us to share his story. It's a really powerful story. And I want to jump right into this episode because he has a really great opening for us today. So welcome, Bill, to the podcast.
All right. This is my story. I'm going to read this because there's so much to try to explain it without a good template, let's say. So my name is William Hart Barbary from Butler, PA, and this is my pharmaceutical nightmare recovery story. After marriage separation in October of 2018, my spiral began. I began drinking alcohol more than usual, which led to odd behavior and poor decisions, and I lost custody of my little girl. This caused more emotional stress, drinking, and odd behavior, which led to a bipolar diagnosis, but I refused medication. After 20 years of alcohol abuse, I quit drinking in April of 2019 and fell into a deep depression and committed myself to the psych ward and began medication. I took numerous combinations of different medications, but nothing worked for an extended period of time. The medications I was prescribed included Ativan, Abilify, Lamictal, Seroquel, Risperidone, Buspar, Tegretol, Propranolol, Zyprexa, and Trazodone. Some were stopped and added with little to no tapers throughout the process. The first few cocktails caused brain fog, anxiety, and exhaustion, leading me to quit my job as a union bricklayer. I also stopped working out, eating poorly, and gained weight. This led to more depression with delusional thinking, and I was given different combinations of medications. I started losing my balance, shaking uncontrollably at times, having severe muscle tension and spasms. Sometimes my throat would close for no reason, extreme negative and delusional thinking, which led to suicidal thoughts and numerous attempts. At one time, I didn't leave my house for 40 days and didn't shower or change my clothes for 21 days. I had sheets over all the windows in my basement to keep it dark and tried to avoid everybody. After months of living like this, in April of 2020, I quit Seroquel and 2 of the other medications cold turkey. I began to hallucinate and hear voices, which led to even worse delusional thoughts. This led to a withdrawal psychosis where I attacked and exposed myself to my sister and niece who were living with me at the time. I fought with the police and got tased and was taken to the hospital before jail. While in the hospital, I was handcuffed to my bed the whole time for 10 days, and only 15 minutes I had to stretch and get a shower. Every hour, they would switch the handcuffs from one ankle and wrist to the other, even while I was sleeping. I was put on 5 different meds and shipped to jail for 8 months. And while I was in jail, My mother died while I was incarcerated, and I had no emotion to this from being on all the medication. After I was released, I was accepted into the behavioral health court program due to having no prior record. I eventually got my daughter back and started my own business. After having disagreements with a few of the social workers involved and family members about medications and other things, I unwillingly was forced to go back to the psych ward, even though the crisis counselor thought it was unnecessary. This led to an increase in medication, losing custody of my daughter, supervised visitation. I lost a lot of jobs. I had to get pill counts, blood draws. I was put on house arrest, and just a whole lot of anxiety and so much more stress. During this time, I bought Dr. Amen's book, The End of Mental Illness, and this led me to further research the harms of these medications. I tried to wean myself off a few of the meds again in July of 2022, and this led to another withdrawal psychosis that ended up with me being chased by the police, and I didn't pull over until my truck ran out of gas. I went underneath my truck to meditate to make it all go away, and I played dead. They pulled me out and couldn't register a heart rate because one of the medications I was on was a beta blocker, and so they hit me with Narcan. They found my medication in the truck, and they thought they were opiates, and I was charged with a DUI and taken to jail and put on withdrawal medication, and I was put in 100% restraints with a see-through mask on, and there's so much to that story. What happened this day and leading up to it could fill a book. I was then put in a padded cell for what I thought was a few days, but it ended up being 3 weeks. At one point, I thought they were trying to kill me, and I began fighting with the corrections officers, and I was tased numerous times and hit with pepper spray, and it had no effect on me. And then I was put back in the restraints for days. I did 3 months for the DUI charge due to being on parole from the first incident and was forced to get back on medication. I was released in September of 2022 and put on house arrest, and I again tried to wean off the medication in November of 2022 and had another psychosis where I left my house while on house arrest and was delusional, and I went back to jail for another 3 months, but remained off the medication. I was released in April of 2023 and put back on house arrest until November of 2023. I lost my driver's license for a year from the DUI charge, which was dropped because I refused a blood draw when I was taken to jail. And September 11th, 2023, my psychiatrist believed that I was misdiagnosed and removed the bipolar diagnosis after showing no signs and symptoms after dealing with all this and being off medication for this time. She never heard the whole story that led to the original diagnosis and events afterwards. Overall, from 2019 to 2023, while on medication and tapering too quickly, I had 5 psych ward visits, 14 months in jail, a year and a half of house arrest, $20,000 in fines and expenses for house arrest and monitor child supervision. I lost numerous friends that were like family, fractured relationship with my in-laws due to my ignorance during my withdrawals, on top of the stigma of all the criminal charges. The thing that hurts the most is the 4 years of quality time I lost with my daughter. After a little over 2 years off all medication, I am physically, emotionally, and spiritually in the best place of my life at the age of 45. I now have partial custody of my little girl, and the masonry business is flourishing. My family and I are closer than ever. The thing I give all the credit to is my faith and reading the Bible daily. This belief system completely rewired my thought process, which took my anxiety, fear, anger, resentment, and blame of others away, on top of numerous other positive changes such as forgiveness, patience, humbleness, and gratitude, which I had very little of before. Last year, I started the Million Minds Medicated Movement group on Facebook to raise awareness of the harms of psychiatric medication and the need for slow tapers, and it now has over 1,600 members. I hope to be more involved in this community in the future and hope that the way mental health is looked at is changed. That's it for now.
Wow. I think hearing you read it rather than watching the video is just better.
Yeah.
Just like the sound quality of it. How hard is that for you to do? You made that seem pretty easy, but I can see that you're maybe a little emotional.
Yeah, it's like everything, like, it's hard to explain. It was so much. And I left so much out too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when we met last week and talked, we were there an hour and a half, I think.
It was almost 2 hours, I think.
Yeah, it was almost 2 hours. And I was like, okay, we have to condense this so we can talk about other things. But that's the thing. There is so much more to your story. But I mean, you survived all that. That's a lot. That's a lot for one person to experience in a lifetime.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. Like I said, I used to have a lot of anger and I don't want to say hate towards people, but I didn't take responsibility of what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I did have some bad things happen that may not have been my fault, but it was the way I responded that just continued that spiral. And it wasn't until I quit playing the victim and blaming everybody and took 100% responsibility for everything until I really realized, what was happening.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like a key component for a lot of people who are, whether it's going to rehab or, who have been in jail or whatever it is they're dealing with, is being able to take responsibility. That's what I've noticed with a lot of people I've sat down and spoken to. And that's the only way that you're going to actually heal and make a change in your life. And you have to want to make the change, right?
Yes,
so,
100%.
Yeah. Something you brought up to me was how, your faith has really changed you. So before that, were you not really religious, or you were, it just wasn't like something that you practiced daily? Or talk a little bit about that.
I would say I was, agnostic. Then I got spiritual. And during the spiritual time, I was reading a lot of Eastern philosophy and sort of the New Age spirituality out there. And it has its positives, but it wasn't until I came to faith and believed in Jesus as my Savior when everything really started to move forward for the better.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I know that reading, I don't know if anybody can see in the video, and if you're just listening, then you can't see the video, but Bill brought a bunch of books with him today. So, and you said something about, like, do you thrift a lot of these books? Is that what you said? You found some of these at, like...
Well, no, there's a website, an app called thriftbooks.com.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I highly recommend it if you
Yeah.
like to read. But the first book that I bought was this one right here.
The End of Mental Illness.
Yes, he is a psychiatrist and I think a neuroendocrinologist.
I'm going to grab it real quick.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Keep talking.
But no, that's whenever I realized that, they always say you have a chemical imbalance, and that has never been scientifically proven. That was a marketing scheme that the pharmaceutical companies used in the 80s whenever they came out with the first SSRIs. And that just opened my eyes to a lot of the things that I was being told, that, there's something wrong with my brain, something wrong with my neurotransmitters. Mm-hmm. So I thought this medication they were giving me was going to fix that problem, and it ended up making things a whole lot worse.
Yeah, so on the front of this, it says how neuroscience is transforming psychiatry and helping prevent or reverse mood and anxiety disorders, ADHD, addictions, PTSD, psychosis, personality disorders, and more. And he's he's a physician and a double board certified psychiatrist and the founder of Amen Clinics and a 10-time New York Times bestselling author. So yeah, this is the book, The End of Mental Illness. So I don't know, talk a little bit about this and like getting into reading. Like, at what point did you really start reading, or were you always a reader and this is just because of what you were going through, you just sort of, shifted what you were reading?
I would say that book right there really shifted in what I was reading.
Yeah.
I have a degree in exercise science from Slippery Rock. So, I started reading a lot of the studies that was released by a lot of the pharmaceutical companies and other agencies about psychiatric medication and how they affect the body. And I started to understand, what they were really doing to our bodies. And it's not good, to be honest. A lot of the studies I read was they would use a placebo pill in a lot of the SSRI studies, especially early on. And these weren't released because the bad studies were never released to the public or the FDA to get approval. And they were showing that the placebo group would sometimes have better results than the groups taking the SSRIs. And then there's no long-term studies on almost any of these medications. The majority of them are 8 to 12 weeks, and they base pretty much their information on that 8 to 12 weeks, and then they take it to the FDA and they say, yeah, it's good, and they approve it, and then it's sort of done.
Yeah.
You know, so the SSRIs came out in the early 80s, I believe, and pretty much it's been about a 40-year study, and it's sort of coming out now that the side effects of these are life-changing. I mean, not just a short-term mental distress like you've heard in my story, but there's I believe it's called PSSD. It's a post-sexual dysfunction disorder from taking SSRIs.
Ion Sports Podcast is proudly participating in Movember's annual fundraising campaign, which encourages people to sign up at Movember.com, grow a mustache, move to commit to walking or running 60 miles, host a virtual event, or mow your own way.
Mow Your Own Way is a choose-your-own-adventure activity and allows people to pick how they want to support Movember. The new challenge could include riding your motorcycle across the country or doing 100 burpees, and allows supporters to participate and not be limited by what they want to do.
All the support will change the face of men's health, raising funds and awareness for mental health and suicide prevention, prostate cancer, and testicular cancer.
The Ion Sports Podcast team, along with Butler Eagles sports writers, have a goal to raise $1,000 for the month of Movember. The charity raises funds to deliver innovative breakthrough research and support programs that enable men to live happier, healthier, and longer lives. Committed to disrupting the status quo, millions have joined the movement, helping to fund over 1,250 projects around the world.
In addition to tackling key health issues faced by men, Movember is working to encourage men to stay healthy in all areas of their life, with a focus on men staying socially connected and becoming more open to discussing their health in significant moments in their lives.
The charity's vision is to have everlasting impact on the face of men's health. To donate or learn more, please visit Movember.com. Movember is a registered 501c3 charity. To donate to our fundraising goal, click the link in our story or bio. Help us at Alter Eagles Ion Sports reach our goal of $1,000 towards Movember for men's health.
On behalf of myself, Eagles sports writer and host Derek Pida.
I am Eagle sports writer Brendan Howe.
And I'm Eagles sports editor Jake Murda Adams.
Thank you.
Just what happens on the inside of your body after you take these for so long is some of it's irreversible.
Yeah. I mean, and I know that you talked about, a little bit about whenever you were coming off them. Something I wrote down here was that the colors were giving you an emotional feeling. Do you remember talking about that?
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what you mean by that?
I just, it's almost like they rewire your brain. Mm-hmm. It's just your senses are a little bit off, or they're more tuned in. Mm-hmm. But it's just very hard to explain, because I remember, what I was thinking while I was coming off, and now that I've been off of them for 2 years, it's just how delusional it was. It's like I wasn't in control. It was just the medications, and then whenever you're coming off of them, the withdrawal effect, it's just awful, and they don't tell you that.
Yeah. And drugs you didn't abuse drugs, did you?
No, I was more of an alcoholic.
It was alcohol, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, in your mind, do you feel like that had a huge component to do with, like, maybe the way that your brain was already wired, and drinking was something that caused you to be angry and all of those things? Do you feel like that was, yeah?
Well, it could be, because whenever we were talking, you said that you're supposed to be off, addiction for a year before you can get a true diagnosis.
Yeah, rehabs, 90 days is a really good time frame, right? To get someone in a place where they start to recognize, like, oh, okay, I can live without these substances. However, up to a year is what they really say to properly have someone detoxed off of substances completely, to really take the time to figure out what's going on with that person, because most of the time there is underlying trauma.
Oh, 100%.
So, and that came up with you as well. And so it's like most people don't realize it until they're completely off of substances. So it can take up to a year to properly diagnose. A lot of people get misdiagnosed, I think in your case too, where then they get put on medication, and and listen, like, I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't mean any disrespect to medical doctors, to psychiatrists. Like, I don't, right? Like, I'm learning this stuff as I'm talking to people, but I'm talking to people with lived experience. Like, I'm talking to you and you've had a lived experience. So obviously you figured out like what works for you. I mean, I know working out is a big thing. That's part of like mental health. And I don't think enough people understand that, like those endorphins, like what that can do for you if you're like on a regular basis, like working out and taking care of your body, you know?
And even with that, there's a whole system that a lot of people don't even know exists possibly in their body. It's called the endocannabinoid system. And the only way it's activated in a controlled way is through exercise. And it's involved with the lymphatic system and the hormones and the neurotransmitters. They actually produce and release the dopamine, the serotonin. It's like its own pharmaceutical factory whenever you start to ignite it. But the only way to do it is through exercise.
Yeah. No, I just think it's so remarkable, like how you've turned around. Do you think that there was a moment where you kind of realized, like, I have to figure this out, you know, thinking about your daughter and how you didn't want to continue to go down this, like, it's almost like every time you got into these situations where you were being prescribed drugs again, or you were back in jail, or you were in the psych ward, it's like, it's like the spiral began, right? That's like where it began. So was there a moment that you realized, or that you remember perhaps, that really just was like, okay, I have to figure this out. Like, I can't continue to have this experience like be my life, right?
I would say the last time I was in the psych ward, I opened the Bible, and a friend of mine said, you know, open the Bible up, and whatever it says, you know, that's sort of what you're meant to read that day. And whenever I did that, it spoke specifically to what I was going through. And then I did it a couple more times, and it was like, okay, this is a little weird. So then I'm like, I think this is the route I have to go.
Okay.
And then I just continued to, you know, start reading the Bible daily, and started to believe more and more every day. And the better I got, or the more I believed, it seemed like the better I got. I was still dealing with a lot of outside noise with the people telling me that you're mentally ill, you need this medication for the rest of your life. And I no longer responded with anger. And that helped me tremendously, because before, you know, I had some anger issues I never really realized I had. And a lot of it has to do with, you know, past traumas, the way you respond to certain situations. And which led me to realize about the fight or flight system, and how trauma and chronic stress just completely hijacks it.
Yeah.
And after doing a lot of reading, as you can see, a lot of these books tap on it, is it's a hijacked amygdala, which is the part of the brain that sends a signal to your HPA axis to prepare yourself to fight or flight. And the system was built in for survival, you know, to flee from a bear back in the day when your life was in jeopardy, not whenever, you know, you're having a bad day, or somebody pulls out in front of you, or you have a bad day at work, or you're worried about the news. It's just, we're constantly bombarded with fear and worry that it never shuts down.
Yeah.
And the main purpose of it, you know, it creates cortisol and adrenaline to prepare our body to run or fight. And whenever it's not turned off, it starts to damage the insides of our bodies, specifically our brain. It causes brain inflammation. And it just continues. And whenever your brain's inflamed due to the excess cortisol, it does a lot.
Yeah. Do me a favor, take this, push it down just a tiny bit, because I don't know if you heard your like was coming through kind of hard. Yeah. Okay. That's all right. You're enunciating, so that's not a bad thing. But
okay.
It was like, I don't know what it was doing. I can't.
Sorry.
You don't have to be sorry. That's my job, is to figure it out. So it's not something I can edit either, too. So,
but that's something. The book up there.
I was gonna say.
The Inflamed Mind. It will explain in a better way than me right now, being nervous as heck, trying to explain all these systems of the body and how it affects our brain.
You're doing really well. Hold on. I want to look. Okay, so
I could give a brief.
I was looking at, so we have Okay, so yeah, really quickly, let's talk about this one really quickly. So this book you have here, Toxic Psychiatry.
It's pretty much self-explanatory. It's written by a psychiatrist as well,
Okay.
who is not a big fan of pharmaceutical drugs to treat mental illness. And I believe that's Peter Bregan who wrote that one. And he also wrote the two that are up there.
Okay.
Your Drug May Be Your Problem and Medication Madness. And
Okay.
it talks about, what these drugs do to you and just the overprescribing of them.
Yeah. Well, because something else that you said too was you weren't given any explanation of what they were giving you or how it was going to make you feel, or when you wanted to stop taking it, that you had to wean yourself off. Like you had no information. They were just like, here, you have to take this. And I think that's a huge issue. I mean, yes, when you pick up a prescription, most of the time at the pharmacy, and they can tell it's the first time you're getting this medicine, they'll say, hey, we have to talk to you really quickly. And most pharmacists are really great at that, right? We just want to make sure you're aware of the side effects, and, they point certain things out. And I've had that happen from time to time. However, I was put on gabapentin in 2016 for a stretched nerve in my arm from my neck and a bunch of stuff. And they didn't explain it to me. And I had suffered with depression and suicidal ideation. So they should have told me that like the top 2 side effects of gabapentin are literally like suicidal thoughts and severe depression. And I didn't know that. I had no idea. And I was just in so much pain. And they were unwilling to do the tests that needed to be done to figure out what was going on so I could get to the root of the problem, right?
Yes.
And I was like, something's seriously wrong here, and I don't want to just take medicine and mask it. I want to figure out where this is coming from, and I want to fix it, so I can go on with my life. I don't want to be someone that's just on pain pills the rest of their life and I'm not going to do that. I want to figure it out. So whenever I stopped taking it, it made me severely depressed. I stopped taking it, and he's like, we need to wean off it. I said, too late. I just stopped taking it.
Yeah.
I was sick of feeling the way that I was feeling. And I said, frankly, like, I'm a little upset that, you didn't explain this to me. And I didn't have the opportunity to go to a different doctor because it was through a workers' comp. So that's that. So I understand that. I mean, what do you think can be done about, I mean, when someone goes to the psych ward, like you had said you had an experience where you were in a straitjacket, right? In a padded room.
That's whenever I was in jail. Yeah.
Okay. That was one of the jail. Okay.
Yeah. But I don't remember talking to anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like I was in and out of consciousness. And when I would come out, I would be like, what's going on? I would yell for help. And I don't remember getting it too often, to be honest.
You said the one time that when you woke up and I think that was the time that you were in the padded cell, right? And you had they had put a mask, they had put something on your face and you were in a jacket and you legit thought you were in hell.
Yes, it was a crazy experience.
You thought that you were...
I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I thought I had to learn another language. I didn't know where I was at. It was very wild.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I said, I thought it was only maybe 3 or 4 days, and it ended up being like 3 weeks I was in there.
Have you since all of this and, the time that you've, gotten your life on track and you said you do have partial custody of your daughter again, correct?
Yes.
And you got to see her this weekend, right? You
Yes.
mentioned something
always
about
awesome.
that. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Have you seen people who maybe knew you during that experience and have those relationships changed, or has anyone come back into your life that maybe you lost then? I mean, I know you talked about your family, that you have a good relationship with your family now, and you've sort of, mended that and you're working on that, right? Cultivating that. But is there anyone else that, I don't know?
The majority of my good friends, I really haven't talked to since everything went down. But I was friends with a few of the corrections officers, and they see me at the gym and out and about, and they always say, like, you look great, you're doing good. And I just would give them a brief rundown. It's like, it was the medications that was making me whatever was happening. You know?
Yeah.
And that was the hardest thing, was trying to tell people who were legitimately trying to help me, and they would say that I was in denial of my disease. But, you know, after reading a lot, like these are just a sample of some of the things I've read. And it's just, there's so much, I don't want to say brainwashing, but misinformation about psychiatry and psych medication. That the truth really doesn't get out because they just have, they have so much power, you know, and a lot of people don't understand that America is one of only 2 countries that allows for pharmaceutical companies to have direct to customer ads. And I forget the other one, but the majority of countries don't allow TV commercials or in magazines. So anything that's sort of negatively said about these medications won't get said because you see the advertisements everywhere, and they will pull the advertisements if they sort of say some negative things about it. And that's why it's so hard to get this message out.
Yeah, it is a hard conversation to have. And I think that what's important for anybody who's listening is I'm the kind of person, and I told you this, that I meet people where they're at, right? I accept them for what they believe in, because who am I to say that your experience, you know, I mean, you had a pretty, you had a pretty gnarly experience. And the fact that you're sitting here and you're so like well-spoken. And when we met for coffee, remember we were in that room and he's like, you can be back here till about 8:45. And those guys started coming to set up, and I immediately started feeling anxious. I was like, I don't want to be in here anymore. Like, I feel like I'm in their way and I want to move. And you were like, I can tell that you're anxious.
Yeah.
And I was like, we need to go out front. We need to move, because I knew at some point the conversation had to like pause and then, you know, pick back up again. So, but it is interesting that when you start to take care of yourself in a way that, I mean, our society, like, drinking is a normal thing, right? It's a social thing.
Yes.
But I do feel like there are a lot more people who are starting to choose like sobriety over that, or even if it's just a little bit more like conscious consumption. That's kind of where I'm at right now, where I'm like, I was definitely every night coming home and having a glass of wine, and, you know, that was my thing.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I wasn't just a couple drinks. I mean, it was heavy.
Yeah.
How much I was drinking for at least 15 to 20 years.
Yeah.
And then when I was talking to one of the psychologists where I go, she was saying that as much as I drink, it would take your nervous system and brain 2 years to just get back to sort of regular functioning.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That's heavy though. Was it ever scary to you? Were you ever like this, that this could be what kills me, like just the alcohol?
Did
you ever have that?
I knew it was going to have an effect on me, but I was just, you know, masking so much things going on that I didn't really care. And it was easy to quit once I realized what I was losing if I didn't.
Yeah.
And I really haven't looked back.
So talk a little bit more about the group that you started on Facebook. I checked it out briefly, but I'd like to hear it from you, since it's something that's like close to you. And
yeah, it's called Million Minds Medicated Movement. It has about 1,600 members, and it's sort of a peer support group where, like, some of the stories that you read on this makes mine look like a walk in the park. And it wasn't really until I started to hear other people's stories and how awful, you know, coming off these medications were for them, that I felt blessed just to deal with what I had to. And it's just, it's a shame. It's sad, you know, how many people's lives have been ruined. And, you know, I'm also blessed to have the chance to get back what I've lost. But some of these people, you know, they're just so far gone they can't.
yeah.
And, you know, some of these people, they've been on medication for 10 years, and it's still 2 years, and they're still trying to wean off. I mean, this is how potent these medications are. They don't realize that they're habit forming, they're addictive, and it just needs to be brought to the attention how awful they are, to be honest. I mean, they're good short term during a psychosis moment, and that's sort of what they're meant to do. You know, like I said, the trials were only 8 to 12 weeks. And like I said, if you look at some of the studies, the people that didn't take the medication actually had longer outcomes, better outcomes at the end.
Okay. Well, what would you say, like, because I have quite a few friends. I have a friend who had, for a while, really struggled with her mental health, and she felt like there was something because she noticed herself, and alcohol was not a component. Illicit drugs were not a component for her. She knew something was off, right, with her emotions. And, after going to therapy for a while and, her doctor really wanted to make sure she got the proper diagnosis, and she was diagnosed as bipolar. And she said, at first I was really scared to take any medicine because when I, wanted to be, she was really an advocate for herself as far as like, I want to understand what the side effects are and how long there are people that have like been on it for a long time. And she did her research, did her due diligence, and was able to sort of have a voice in like what she wanted to take. And she said after probably about a month or so, she started to feel herself coming out of a fog almost, so I know that there are people, right, where medication can help them. I think your situation is just so unique in that there's a lot of people who end up in that situation where drugs just get thrown at the situation, right? And there's not proper diagnosis. And that's essentially what we're talking about, right?
Yes.
But I think it's good for people to be able to have the option and have the choice to say, like, I don't want to put that in my body, right? I mean, that's it's a conversation I need to get into a little bit deeper just because I do think that we live in a society where there's a lot of like, you should do this, you should do that, like you should do what's right. But then there's people who say, well, it should be your choice. So I don't know. I feel like when it comes to us having choices for what we do with our body, we're in a bit of a messy situation right now here in this country.
Yes, there's one book. It's written by Len Losnick. He, I believe it's called Curing Mental Illness Through the Fight or Flight System. You can get it on Kindle. I don't have the book because if you bought the book, it was $114.
Oh,
yes. Okay. He worked for NASA. I believe he was actually involved in creating the GPS system in the 80s. So this guy, he's very intelligent.
Yeah.
And his mission, his goal was to try to predict who would have mental illness issues or symptoms while they were on space missions and how to combat that.
Oh, you had brought that up, yeah.
And
so just a teeny bit here. Push this down. Push this middle part. I know it's so weird.
Good?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
We good?
Just bring this up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. That's perfect.
This
there you go.
Embarrassing.
It's not. I'll edit that out.
But this is another. Okay. You don't have to. But this book, it was awesome. He pretty much says that, and I believe the diagnoses that we get for mental illness or anybody gets, they're not real diseases. Mm-hmm. They're the symptoms that you have. Yeah. And then they give you this diagnosis and then you think it's a disease. He believes that it starts out sort of like anxiety and it goes on a scale from anxiety to like the OCDs, the ADHDs. It goes to depression and then it can go to the bipolar and then schizophrenia. And he, like we talked earlier about the cortisol, he was saying, the overactive fight or flight response slowly kills your brain cells and the connections with the excess cortisol and just the mechanics of how the physiology of the brain works. Like I said, the inflamed mind will explain it a lot better than I can.
Yeah.
But as time goes by and you're not shutting that down, the brain chemistry starts to die off. The neurons start to die, the connections aren't as good, and you have neuron death. And through the neuron death, that's where a lot of these symptoms start to come out, where you're depressed, you can't think, you have brain fog, you're constantly nervous, overthinking, negative thoughts, and that just feeds into that system. Mm-hmm. And then eventually, a lot of the more severe symptoms, it's almost like the brain's self-defense mechanism is trying to get you away from everybody and everything because you're constantly in a state of defending your life. So then you have the bipolar where you're up and you're down, and then you start seeing things, hallucinating, and then you have the schizophrenia. And like I said, the book describes it so much better than I can, being, nervous and talking for the first time. But it's eye-opening to think that it's just a spectrum. It's not you're this disease and you're this, so you have to take this. And there's even videos where, the same guy would go to numerous different psychiatrists with the same symptoms, and he would get different diagnoses and then be given the medications. But then some of the medications you're not supposed to take if you have one of the diagnoses.
Okay. I mean, I think it's really remarkable how you've just become like an advocate for yourself. So you said something about a book. Have you thought about writing a book?
Yeah, I have, but I think the page I have, that's where I put a lot of my writings, and I always leave the references so people know, like, this isn't just my opinion. I mean, it is my opinion, but it's based on, dare I say, facts or other doctors and scientists' opinions.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a lot of books are like that, as long as you're giving credit where credit's due, right?
Yes.
And references and all of that. It's still your story, though. I don't know.
Someday, maybe. I may already be writing it.
So maybe he's looking at the camera. He's like all concerned with looking. I was like, you don't have to worry about the camera. I barely look at it. And
Well, I had to do, the
the eye thing.
Yeah.
People listening are like, we can't see what you're talking about. Well, watch the video then.
Yes.
Honestly, I think that, like, the short synopsis you gave at the beginning obviously doesn't do any. It doesn't really give credit to the things that you went through, like teeny tiny stories you told me about your time in jail where they were tasing you, and there were how many officers that were trying to stop you, and they said they used it as like a training. But it was because, and you don't remember, but you don't remember.
I remember getting tased, yeah.
I remember getting tased, but you don't. Didn't you say you felt like the Incredible Hulk or something? You just felt like really strong.
Yes, because I thought they were going to kill me, and I just started to fight with them, and I was pulling them in through the little slot of the pie hole, and I was getting tased. I have the marks still on my hands and body, and then just out of the blue, I sort of came to be, and I just got down on my knees, and I was like, what's going on? And
I bet that probably threw them off too, because they're probably like, wait.
And then I just remember they hit me with the knockout shot, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't move, but I was still conscious. I could feel, it felt like I was like being dragged through blood and water or something.
Wow.
And then I woke up in the restraints.
That's scary.
And the thing is, I've never been in a fight in my life, And then all of a sudden, I'm fighting with cops, fighting with COs, and everybody. It just, the spiral that happened, it made it look so right that I was mentally ill, but nobody believed that it was the medication causing this, because everybody just is so in tune that, oh yeah, psychiatry, it's a real medical profession, but a lot of their theories, it's very opinion based. It's not science based. I mean, I even had a psychiatrist tell me psychiatry isn't really a science; it's more of an art. And when she said that, I was like, oh, I wish I had that on record.
Yeah, you're like, I wish I was recording this.
It's like, we tried this and we tried that. It's like an artist, we put a little bit of red here, put a little bit of yellow here, and hope it works out. It's like they put a little medication here, put an antipsychotic here, SSRI here, and let's just hope for the best. And even in that aspect, whenever one of the side effects of an SSRI, if you have depression, is mania. So then they're going to say, oh, we misdiagnosed you. You're actually bipolar. So then they take you off the SSRI and then put you on all the antipsychotics, mood stabilizers.
But how quickly is that transition, right? I mean, how you're not weaned off of something for that long.
And that's the other thing I wanted to say is, whenever I would go to a psychiatrist and say, they're not working, I'm feeling worse, they would just stop it and then put me on something else.
But yet they were telling you after the fact, oh, we have to wean yourself off.
Well, I was never being weaned off until the very end by somebody, because I was always doing it on my own.
Yeah.
And even at that aspect, there's no guideline on psychiatric medication tapering.
Yeah.
There is one book that just recently came out. It's called The Maudsley's Deep Prescribing Guidelines. I believe it's written by Mark Horowitz. If you go to my page, The Million Minds Medicated Movement, you can see a lot of the books and articles that I recommend. And there is a small community of psychiatrists, doctors, neurosurgeons, and endocrinologists that are starting to speak their minds about how, the whole way mental health is looked at is possibly more damaging than helpful.
Wow. No, I mean, I just think it's really brave of you to talk to me. I mean, when I reached out, I was like, well, not a lot of men want to come and talk about their feelings and talk about what's been going on and what's happening. And I mean, when I partnered with Movember this month with the sports podcast and with this podcast, just to bring awareness to that, and that actually is a cool thing. It's a good thing. It's a necessary thing. And so I think it's also a reflection on, what you are sort of passing down to your daughter, because she will remember this, right? She will remember that you took everything that it was in you to get better for her. I mean, really, that was like one of the top reasons why you wanted to figure this out, was because you'd already lost her twice. And that's, I don't know. I'm not a parent, so I always say this to people that I can't imagine what it would be like having a child and then realizing like you have no control over when you see them or how often you see them or if you see them at all.
Yeah.
And how that could add on to what you're already dealing with.
Just even right now, I'm chewing gum, but it's still, I get angry for a second, but then I realize I wouldn't be where I'm at if everything didn't happen the way it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why part of my faith has helped me sort of process everything instead of trying to control the situations like I did in the past and try to look like the good guy, make other people look bad. That's the biggest regret I have, because I still have those fractured relationships that I really want to work on, because I'm not that person at all. And like I said, just my thought process and the medication coming off of it made me a person I wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the last time I saw you was high school.
Oh yeah, we were hurdling.
We were hurdlers.
Mm-hmm.
Hurdlers.
But no, it's funny because I think I made a post a while ago, because I might have been photogenic in my late teens, and there was a couple pictures, with me doing track and baseball and football in the paper. And then if you go and then you see the news articles or the police reports during this time, it's like, what happened? It's like, what was added and what was removed, and
that's always the reaction is, well, I wonder what happened.
Yeah.
People always have that. Well, I think usually it's a curiosity, right? To how someone can, and everybody just assumes that you're making the choice to be that way, right? And you're like, nah, it's coming from somewhere.
Yeah. Like I said,
it's coming from somewhere.
When I was coming off
something.
these medications, it's like, it was not me. It was like somebody else was taking control of my body and my thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I remember what they were, looking back, I just can't imagine having the thoughts that I had back then.
Yeah.
Just the constant suicidal thoughts and just the delusional thoughts that occurred.
Yeah.
But like after reading so many books, so many articles, so many other people's stories, it gave me the confidence to realize I'm not that person. I'm not crazy. This is happening because of these withdrawals and just the amount of stress I was dealing with. I didn't have good coping mechanisms, trying to control everything will make somebody go crazy while they're going crazy coming off of everything. And just the neurochemistry of our brain is just, they have no idea what they're doing. They have a glimpse, but it's very hard to understand, because one of the things we'll always tell somebody taking medication is it's like a diabetic taking their insulin. And I believe that. But then after reading everything, I was like, well, if you say I have a chemical imbalance, how am I taking the measurement of my chemical imbalance to know how much medication I need? And even at that, during these studies, the more you get into, they don't, the amount of the neurotransmitters or whatever they're testing in the brain cannot be measured through the amount that's in the blood. It's two completely different things. So unless they actually look into the brain while it's alive and having a stressful moment or on the medication, they're never going to know what these medications are truly doing to the brain.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, think back to when they first started experimenting on people's brains and performing lobotomies, and they thought that that was curing people of so many ailments.
Do you know he won a Nobel Peace Prize for that? The guy that invented that?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are people that after they couldn't talk, they couldn't.
And that's what a lot of people are calling, it's called polydrugging whenever you're on so many different types of psychiatric medication.
Mm-hmm.
They're calling it a chemical lobotomy.
Oh, wow.
And that's, like I said, there are times where, like, I just wanted to crawl out of my skin, after I realized it's called akathisia. It's a symptom of the medication that it just messes with your whole nervous system. And you I'm sort of having flashbacks of, like, I would try to go to Walmart or the grocery store, and I would just be sitting in the parking lot in my car, just like constantly flexing. And I was like, because I was so nervous, I couldn't go.
You couldn't get out of your car and go in?
No.
Because you were, like, afraid something might happen?
It was just, like I said, the thoughts were just, they did not make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you have constant fear, worry, in your body. You just feel like you want to crawl out of your own skin.
Yeah.
And that's when the suicide thoughts and attempts started coming in, where, like, I got to get out of this. I can't live like this.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, so much more that we could talk about. We could talk for another hour probably, but we don't have that luxury.
Well, maybe some other time. Maybe.
Yeah. What do you want to, like, leave anyone who's listening with, who, whether it's a family member that, they're not sure how to help them, or maybe them themselves are going through something?
I would say the most important thing is, it's very hard. Having family support and a good group of people that will listen to you and not agree with, a diagnosis. Listen to your story. You have to not be afraid to bring out the things you don't want to talk about. And that's something that, when I was in jail, I had a therapist that she brought a lot out. I'd rather not talk about it here, but
that's fine.
It explained a lot of why I was the way I was for so many years. I always had anxiety. I was always, like, constantly nervous, worrying what everybody was thinking, worrying, like, what's this person doing? It's like that hypervigilance, and it was that overactive fight or flight response that I just had since I was a kid, to be honest. And that's whenever I started to drink a lot, whenever I was in my late teens, early 20s, was to mask that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of mental illness, if you want to call it an illness, instead of they're just symptoms of, something needs to change, and addiction, they're one and the same, because you're trying to escape what you can't handle. There's something going on in our brains that the addiction tries to take that away from the front of our thoughts.
Yeah.
Because there's so much, and exercise and eat healthy. If it was that easy,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be here talking, but it's so much. My faith, the habits, the lifestyle, there's just so much.
Well, exercise is one thing that I think for anyone out there, and oftentimes people think that means, well, I can't go to the gym and lift weights. And it's like, no, you could walk. Like, if you walked every day, that's something. You're getting some type of activity in your body.
Oh, at least just 20 minutes to 30 minutes.
Yes, it's something. So, well, thank you. It's really brave of you to share your story. Like, when you reached out, and then when we met, and I was like, holy moly, I was like, this is quite the story. So I don't know. It's just really brave of you to share it. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
So
it was great.
And bringing your books.
Yeah, my books. They're like it's my new addiction.
Yeah. That's good. That's good.
I guess so, yeah.
I think so. I think it's great. So thanks.
Well, you're very welcome.
Thanks, man. Thank you for tuning in to Alter Eagle. Join me every Monday for a new episode. And be sure to click subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Follow us on Instagram at Alter Eagle Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.